Okay, hi everyone. As part of the foundation, we are here today to bring out issues regarding college, COVID, and careers. What we have seen is among the youth, there has been a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear about what careers will be most feasible post-COVID. So we have with us a university counselor. She's currently employed with the Oberoi International School in Mumbai, and Tiffany is joining us from the States. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for being here.
No, I'm really glad to be here. Honestly, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So like I said, Tiffany, it's going to be a very informal talk. And can you give us some information on what, according to you, is changing post-COVID? What careers are we looking at in terms of, post-COVID? We have the vaccines out right now. We are estimating that the colleges will open up in the near future, especially this year. So what would you think are some of the options that the students should look at?
For careers,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've known for a while that we need more people going into sort of the mental health professions. That's been a growing field. A lot of my students are looking at psychology and things like that as far as careers are concerned. I also think this has sort of made a big lens onto research. A lot of people got pretty excited about all the research that's going on to get the vaccinations, and then even distribution of the vaccinations. So even that kind of part, how do you package them? Product design, there's packaging design. I mean, there's majors like that in university that kids don't even realize exist. So I think now people are starting to realize that there's a lot of growth in those fields and a lot of potential. The other things that we're seeing have been kind of going on for a long time. People, I feel like, because they've been stuck at home, have been doing a lot more things independently and creative. And creative is huge right now. If you can do something that a robot can't do, which is creative, then you're in a good space. And then finally, the whole aging, anything having to do with like gerontology, and that can be architecture, the idea that we need to stop using stairs in some of these places because as the population ages, they can't walk up the stairs. So using, ramps instead. If you're into IT and things like that, trying to help old people so that they don't get scammed. With all of these phone calls, give us your information and your bank account and you've overdrawn this and they panic. So trying to help people with that information, protecting people. I think some of them have been kind of on a trajectory anyway, even before COVID, like the creative and the gerontology and things like that. But I think for some, just the awareness that there's this whole market out there, trying to help people mental health wise, distribution of vaccinations, just, logistics, things like that.
Right. So when Tiffany, you are highlighting a lot of the creative part, because we have an upsurge of technology right now. We've seen, students using technology not only for social media purposes, but in terms of schooling as well. So the entire emphasis has been on technology. When you're bringing out creativity, what forms of creativity are you getting into?
Well, I mean, I think that's the... India right now is going through a big renaissance with education, right? I mean, everybody has heard about the NEP changes and everything else. So in the next few years, there's going to be a lot of changes. And I think it's where things overlap, where all of this excitement is really happening, So instead of just studying biology or economics, you're going to instead be sort of learning skills, right? And so you're going to learn how to communicate. And if you want to learn how to be a good writer, you practice. So do you want to practice at university by doing, lab reports, right? Because you want to be in the lab and doing science things, or do you want to learn how to do it by doing a research paper for your history class? And so those skills are going to transfer no matter what. You're going to be a good writer, no matter what it is that you study. right? You're going to be able to present. Now, are you going to present the information that you learned in the lab, or are you going to present, right? I mean, so no matter what it is, it's going to be where all of these, you're going to use these skills. The creative part sneaks in everywhere, right? I mean, even if you're doing, computers, right? I mean, a huge thing with computers right now is, video games and all of that kind of stuff. And you have to be creative in order to do that. Engineers are creative, right? They're looking for new solutions, to problems. So you have to be creative if you're an engineer. So, I mean, I think a lot of those, there may be traditional careers that you've never thought about being creative before, but you have to be creative. And if the last year has taught us anything, it's that we are incredibly resilient and creative. We used to have, if you had this problem, this is how you solved it. And now all of a sudden we've been locked in our apartments and you can't do it that way anymore. So we found another solution. And I think that really shows just how creative we are. So, I mean, I think I don't think it's that you're only going to be creative. It's going to be one of the skills that you use along with being a good communicator, along with, all of these other things. It's going to be part of your job is to be creative, to solve these problems in a way that no one has ever thought about solving them before.
Right. And I totally agree with you. I think we've been very creative through the pandemic. I think we've, for example, psychology has gone on to Zoom sessions, which we never did before. So I just want to highlight one thing, Tiffany. You've been in India for quite some time. Most of our schools are also very traditional, ICSE, SSE, CBSE schools. I'm not sure they have the research, the technology, the emphasis on communication and the skill set. So what would be some of the options for those students?
Well, I mean, two things. One is, there's two very different education philosophies, right? So India is a little bit more traditional, but the Indian economy is doing fine. It's not that there's anything wrong with that way of education. The UK does a very similar way of education, as you know. So please don't think that, one is better than another. They're just two different philosophies. So I don't want to make it sound like, the Indian schools, the traditional Indian schools are doing anything wrong, because they're not. There's something to be said about that skill set too. Right. Being able to memorize large pieces of data. I think you have to have your own drive, which I think is something that I find breathtaking when I'm in India, is just how people get stuff done. There's not a lot of whining going on. This is your education and you grab hold of it with two hands. And I mean, I think that's beautiful. So please, I hope it doesn't come across like I think that there's something wrong with that way of doing education. I also find that, I've worked in 5 different countries, so 6 if you include the United States. And, I was in China before I was in India. I was in Saudi Arabia before that, Dubai before that, Bangladesh. And so a lot of them have very similar systems to the Indian education system. And, kids find a way to take that information that they've memorized and do something with it. They don't just regurgitate it. They find a way to do something with it. I just think it's part of the human, brain, is that, you're trying to create something new with it. So, I mean, I think kids find ways to do stuff at our school, and I'm sure other schools are contacted as well. Universities are giving tons of opportunities for students to get involved. The latest one that I got was a university in the US, which is having a filmmaking competition on the UN sustainable goals, right? So you have scientists and filmmakers putting together this 2-minute video on how to make the world a better place. And so, and those are free to get involved in. They're on every university website. So I think for kids, even if their school isn't offering it because they're busy doing other things and they don't have the resources, if you go to university websites, they have tons of ways to get involved in competitions, in, essay writing, workshops, and they're all free. That's the beauty of it. Like, these don't need to cost, $1,000. They're free to get involved in.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic has definitely, in a very positive sense, redefined the learning for us. So back then, I used to go to the US to take some courses, and we're doing it on Zoom today.
Yep.
And so we have very reputed, established therapists who are doing these sessions online. So I think what is very, very beneficial is currently the youth has the opportunity to sort of touch base with, the best of the educators from the world.
Sure. Well, and a bunch of universities, they didn't like the idea that education, especially at the tertiary level, was becoming kind of elitist. And so they've published a ton of free online MOOCs, Stanford, MIT, Harvard, and you can go and you can take their online classes for free. Yeah. And so, and so if you've always wanted to take, a photography class, you can do that. And again, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money.
So where do you think I think Coursera is one of the places where they're putting up, yeah. So are there any other websites where the students can sort of look at these?
Yeah, I mean, if you Google free online MOOCs, Stanford, MIT, Harvard, they'll all pop up. It's all public information, and we really kind of we've always encouraged kids, even before the pandemic, to check them out, just as another way of getting information. Because I think it's really easy to get caught up in these programs that are attached to universities that cost thousands of dollars, and you think that you're getting something extra, but it's really just another online class. So if you can do it for free, there's not that pressure of finishing it either. So if you get online and you're not really enjoying yourself, you can quit without feeling like you've just wasted $1,000 or $1,000 of your parents, which isn't a good feeling. So I really like these free online classes because there are some, I think, that are quite decent, depending on the student and how they like to learn, and how the MOOC is put together.
And I'm just going to point out here that these are all certified courses. So at the end of the course, they're also issuing a certificate, right?
Yeah, but the other thing is, I have to tell you, students really shouldn't worry about the certificates and things like that. If you do a course that you enjoy, that's great. Like, you're doing this for you. You're not doing this to build a profile or because a university requires it. You should be spending your free time doing things that you enjoy. And then you'll find universities that appreciate those same things. And that means it's a good fit for you. In all the years that I've been doing this, I've only had to send certificates to South Korea. That's it. Okay. No other university system ever asks for any proof. So really what you should be doing in your free time is what makes you happy. So if it's academic stuff, then do academic stuff. Take an economics online MOOC. If you would rather read 50 books, challenge yourself to read 50 books in the next year, then do that. That if you're an introvert and that's how you want to spend your time, universities love readers. There's no formula for this. If you enjoy doing research, then write a book, but don't feel like you have to do that because a university wants you to do it. You should be doing these things to figure out how you like to spend your time and what are your non-negotiables. At the schools that I've worked at, I've had high academic kids, and they want to spend their extra time doing, math competitions, and that's great. But I also have kids that say, you know what, I just want to pass my classes because in all my free time, I want to learn how to play the guitar. Yeah. And now I want to learn how to play the banjo. And now great. If that's where you want to spend your energy, we can find universities out there that will appreciate those things. So I'm really trying to get kids to understand that this is the time for them to figure out who they are, not to change who they are to make a university happy. None of this is about the university. And that's sort of why we talk about universities outside India, is only because it opens up opportunities so that it's not so competitive.
Right. And I think this is a very important point because I think last year, most of your IB schools have canceled the SATs and the entrance exams. And I think, so are we having them this year post the pandemic or during? No?
I don't know of a single university that is requiring SAT or ACTs for students for this next cycle. because they just know that there's lots of reasons why students aren't taking exams right now.
Right.
And nobody wants to be the university that required it and then be the cause of a super spreader, right? I mean, if all of a sudden it was because X university said, I mean, nobody wants to be that university. So they've all just said, listen, we're just going to postpone for another year. They'll get the data and they'll figure out if they need to sort of use them again, in the future, or if maybe they'll like this. I mean, maybe that's a silver lining, is that more universities, there have always been universities that are test optional, especially for international students. But I think there will be more.
Right. I had one of my professors tell me a couple of years back that just because you ace your marks in psychology doesn't make you a good therapist. And I think that really sit well, because it's about the skill sets and who you want to be and how you want to carry it out. So you spoke about the SATs and ACTs, but I still see a lot of students stressing on these exams.
Yep. Yeah, and I don't know how to reach them. I don't know how else to say, other than if it were me, I wouldn't worry about it. Right. Honestly, I mean, if you're a grade 11 student right now, there's not a single university that is requiring SATs. So you don't need to worry about that. They've already said that they're test optional for the next 2 years. So last year, this coming year and next year. So you don't need to worry about that. So spend that time. I always tell students, I want you to do something, right, that doesn't involve video games and the mall.
Okay.
So as long as you do something, however you want to spend your time, that's not a waste of time, because you're figuring out who you are. So instead of, studying for an exam that might or might not happen, but we know is not required, spend that time doing something else, showing a university, another facet of you. And that's really, I think, a much better use of time.
So then, Tiffany, can you tell people that what are the criterias that we need to sort of get ourselves into university for this year and the following year?
So, I mean, as always, the first thing they look at are your grades, whether it's a US style university that's looking at your school grades, or it's an India, UK style university that's going to look at your predicted grades and your final exams, right? So either way, so that's the first thing that they're looking for. And then they just, again, want to see how you spend your time. Are you a reader? Are you a sports person? Are you a musician? That's what they're looking for. So that's really important for US universities. And you can be an academic, that's okay. But not all students should have to feel pressured to be 100% academic. They can have outside interests. And if you're looking for a UK or an India style university, then instead of sort of outside interests, they want to make sure that you're aware of what the major entails, and that you're basing it on some concrete reason why you want to study that, not just because you watched Law and Order, so you want to be a lawyer, and do the mic drop and whatever. They want to see that you did an internship, or you wrote a research paper, right, where you got a lot of information and you boiled it down into an argument, because that's what lawyers do. They do a lot of research behind the scenes before the 2 days in the courtroom that you see on television. So as long as you can sort of do things where model United Nations, forensics, where you're showing them, look at, this is how I spend my free time, like this is what I enjoy doing when I have an extra day, this is what I'm spending doing. And so you can see that I'm a natural born XYZ. And so that's what it is. And some of them have been difficult. I mean, doing law internships right now, it's impossible. I mean, the courts aren't really functioning yet. So, lawyers are kind of stutter stepping. Another one is medicine right now, right? I mean, you can't get anywhere near a hospital. And so that's another difficult one. And so that's when I think, reading comes into play, doing your own research papers. I mean, there's always ways around it. That's where that creativity comes in. So yeah, but for everything else, I mean, we have a huge internship program that we do. So you can still do internships virtually. The boss will give you a project to work on from home. You can Skype in and have your meetings every morning and then work independently. So, I mean, there's still lots of opportunities.
So is there a particular platform that we need to reach out? Where do people see these internship programs?
So, I mean, the thing is, our school does it. And I think there are schools that help organize them for the summer. But if you're at a school that doesn't organize them, you can find your own. Use your parents' connections, and try to find a friend of a friend. And you'll be surprised who steps up and will help you out. I wouldn't recommend working for mom or dad. I don't think that's a good experience for everybody, because they're either too easy on you or more than likely they're too hard on you. And so you can still work at mom or dad's work, just not under mom or dad. But yeah, and if you can do it for a few weeks, get a project to work on, deal with adults that aren't paid to love you, or who aren't required to love you because they're related to you. Show up on time, appropriately, talk. I think all of those again are life skills. They're transferable. So even if you do an internship and you say, you know what, I don't want to be a banker after all, that's still useful information.
Right.
You learned about yourself.
Right. And Tiffany, a lot of people who travel internationally from India, earlier the norm was that you would want to probably stay back, get your, finish your courses, your master's program, and probably get a job. We've seen US go through a whole transformation, and we've seen other countries as well. And now with COVID coming in, it's going to get difficult. So what should students look at in terms of settling in, job opportunities in other countries? Which are the countries that you would be saying will be more friendlier than the rest?
So, I mean, it changes all the time, right? So, and that's one of the things that, our office tries to stay on top of. In the past, the easy countries to stay back after you graduate would probably be Canada, Ireland, Germany, Australia. Those are the big ones that we really talk about. UK, you can stay for 2 years after you graduate. So there again, but that's changed back and forth, flip-flopped in the last couple of years. So you got to, keep on top of that one. The other thing that we're finding is, it depends on where about in the country it is, so in the cities, I think a lot of times there's a lot more lockdown. So the universities that we're seeing that are in the big cities, some of them haven't opened again because the numbers are still high. Yes. But the universities that are kind of out in the middle of nowhere, a lot of those are fully functioning. They're still they're open with masks and limited, but they have classes that are in person. So depending on, what you want, I know some kids are doing fine learning online, but I do know that some kids are really struggling. It's also expensive to go to university. So you have to sit there and say, do I really want to spend that much money if I'm going to be, learning like this? Yes. So if that's one of your concerns, I would check out some of the universities that are in the suburbs or a little bit isolated, because those campuses seem to be more open.
Okay, that's a great point, right? Because a lot of students I know from the US or the UK and other countries have come back to India and are working in different time zones. And I'm like you said, it is expensive, and we don't know when this will end.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody last week, and they're at a university in Alabama, and they said they have a large Indian population, and 25 of the Indian students decided not to go home. They stayed on campus during all of this. And she said it's quite funny because they've taken over one of the abandoned lots and they play cricket every day. Wow. So I mean, and this is a university that I would have never even really thought of. I met with them because I didn't know much about them, but there are these little kind of beautiful bubbles happening, where they decided to stay as a group, and they've kind of, embraced it.
So since we're talking on this topic, would you think it's more because, of course, you're paying for the entire experience of going to college and university, and we're stuck in work from home modes or, studying from home. what would your advice be, from the counseling point of, you know the university, you know the student,
Sure.
you know what the student is expecting from the university. What would you advise students who are currently doing the 11th standard and thinking of colleges abroad?
I mean, the biggest thing for my office really is trying to find cheaper ways to do things, because I think there's a ton of pressure that goes along with, spending, 360,000 on your undergrad, and then you've got to get a job, you've got to was this a good investment, whatever else. So to me, if you can find universities that will give you merit scholarships and things like that, it takes some of the pressure off of yourself. So to me, if you can look at some universities that maybe aren't the most famous universities, because they're not really fighting to get students there, but if you can look at some of the universities that are maybe in the top 30 or the top 50, you can get some good deals. It's the same education, the same education. They use the same books. They're going to have uncomfortable beds. They're going to have some professors that stink and some that are great. I mean, it's just, the food is going to be terrible. I mean, university it's just university. So try not to idolize it, that if you go to one of these really famous schools, it's, everybody gets a unicorn. These are just universities. You're going to get an education and you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So, I mean, I can understand that if you're paying 80 grand a year to sit at your parents' house on a computer, that's not maybe such a good investment. But if you can get to a university and they're going to give you, a scholarship for 3/4 of it, which is what most international students do, is they get merit scholarships. Right. Then it takes a little bit of pressure off. Then the university experience doesn't have to be this perfect thing that you've bankrupt your parents over. So we're always looking for, cheaper ways to do things. There's, a university in, there's lots of universities in India where you can do the first year, in India while this mess clears up, and then transfer to the UK or the US or whatever after a year or two. And again, saves a lot of money. So it takes a little bit of pressure off this being this ideal experience. It's just a university. Yesterday, actually, I met another one in Malaysia. That's the same thing. You can go to Malaysia and do the first 2 years, of university, and then transfer to the US. So again, takes a little bit of pressure off if you are doing it online.
So you do think universities are more flexible, I would say, right now in taking transferred students as well?
Well, I mean, the U.S. system is all about transfers, because the U.S. system, it's like the Ashokas and the Flames that we have in India now. Yep. So it's a 4-year program, and the first 2 years is liberal arts, which I know a lot of people throw the term around, but what that means is that everybody gets a broad knowledge base. So you can't just go like at the traditional Indian universities, you can go and study economics for 3 years. Yes. That's how the UK does their system too. But in the US, the first 2 years are just about exploration. Their introduction level classes. Everybody takes an English class, a science class, a math class, an art class. It doesn't matter what you're majoring in. And within there, when they say you have to take an English class, there might be 50 different classes you can choose from. Yes. So you can explore a little bit. So because it's not really linked to your major, US universities don't care where you do those first 2 years. Most people go and do it, at the same university that they're going to graduate from. But we have an entire system where in those first 2 years, you could do them at, the Mumbai campus or in Malaysia or at a community college, save a lot of money, and then transfer for year 3 and 4. And your degree looks just like anybody that was at the university for 4 years. It's not like there's an asterisk next to your name that says only came for the 3rd and 4th year. So I think that takes a lot of pressure off. And I feel for students who are going through this process, because it's just, there's so much pressure, to to get into a competitive school, to get the career that's going to, set your parents up and you up for life. And because people have made so many sacrifices. So if you can find a cheaper way to do this, then it doesn't have to be such a big sacrifice. And then you don't have as much pressure put on yourself.
Right. And I do agree. I think that's a very, very useful tip that you've given us of transferring, after the completing your first 2 years, because I've seen a lot of parents also being very, overwhelmed as to whether they want to send their kids right now in the pandemic, because most countries have not yet started a full-blown vaccination program. We also know that the vaccination for students is not out yet. Right.
Right.
So, yeah, would you suggest a Singapore? I mean, the country is closer to the country you're living in. What would you suggest?
Sure. I mean, the thing is, students have this idea of, going to university in the US or in the UK. But, you have to realize you're really far away from home. I mean, I wasn't ready to do that at 18. Now, I'm not as savvy as my students. At 18, I was not that savvy. So, I mean, I do know that they're a little ahead of where I was, but, you're far away from home. And I think this pandemic has really kind of made us realize that although the world is shrinking with transportation and whatever else, because things move so fast, bad things move fast too, like this pandemic. And so, being far away from home, I think it's easy to idolize going far away from home, but really, even just going to another city in India can be an adventure. So I don't think it has to be, 6 different time zones away and 3 flights and, whatever else. You can have an adventure and you can grow up really, just going a few cities away. Singapore is great. And the way that they've handled, the pandemic, things are pretty open there. So I think that and Singapore is, it's pretty safe. It's multi-culti. So that's kind of nice for parents. I think I digress, and I know I talk a lot, so I apologize. But, I think sometimes students feel like being an adult means that they get to make this decision on their own. And I think they quickly realize that being an adult means you have to take into consideration a lot of other people. I mean, you and I are both moms, we're wives. I can't remember the last time I got to make a decision just thinking about me. And I think that's the part about being an adult. And so as these young people start to make a decision as to where they're going to university, they need to realize that they have to take into consideration their parents, finances, what's going to make them comfortable. You don't want to go somewhere where your parents are going to worry about you for 3 or 4 years. That's not fair.
I think what the concern is right now is the country is going into the shutdown. So, we saw countries like Netherlands, Denmark, most of these European countries doing well for some time, and they are suddenly in a shutdown for 6 months. And you have students stuck, and I had some of the students stuck for some time. And I think that brought in the whole anxiety and also the whole travel experience, with the quarantine. The rules are different from every country. So give me 3 tips or 3 or 4 tips as to, what is the criteria of selecting your university, regardless of the course that you're doing.
Sure. I mean, I think it really depends on the student and the family, so usually when we talk about it, we talk about maybe 10 different factors that could be taken into consideration. If I were to boil them, and it depends on the families and the kids, which ones are their non-negotiables. But I think one would be make sure that the academics are what you want them to be. So if you want to only study economics for 3 years, well, then make sure you're going to a course that allows you to do that. If you like more of, instead of the deep dive, if you want to do a broad education, then find a university that allows you to do that. There are schools that are really competitive once you get there, and kids like to exercise that muscle. Great. But there's also a lot of universities that are cooperative, where you have relationships with your professors and small class sizes, and you can just focus on being a student and, growing. And, so I think really figuring out what's the best environment for you to learn, and try to find universities that will give you that. You're the consumer in all of this. If universities don't get kids, they have to close. They're a business. So, don't feel like this is a college market. This is a student market. There's 9,000 universities out there. So you should find the ones that provide the academics the way that you learn best. What do you want? You should be selfish in this. The second one is, what is the outside environment like? Is it a place that has 4 seasons so you can experience that? And you want to learn how to go skiing and skating and see the leaves fall and all of that? Do you want to just be in a warm place where you can go to the beach every day and play cricket, 365 days a year? I do think, you're not going to just be in your classrooms and in the library. You're going to have a life outside too. So try to figure out how you can, meet your needs that way. You mentioned the Netherlands, right? You're going to ride a bicycle everywhere. And so for some kids who haven't been able to do that in downtown Mumbai, that sounds like a dream come true. For me, that's my nightmare. I hate bicycles. So, think about, what is your life going to be like outside, outside of class, because you're going to have a lot of downtime where you get to explore other interests. And then I would say the third thing is, think about the impact on, your family. Think about the money, think about how far away you're going to be. Some of these kids travel a lot, their parents travel a lot. So, if mom or dad is always in London, for work, well, then maybe that's not a bad place to sort of base, so you can go and have your adventure, but every time mom or dad flies in, they're going to take you out to dinner. You can recharge your batteries. They can bring you the stuff you forgot at home. If you have an auntie that lives in New Jersey, well, then maybe it's kind of nice to base, maybe your search around there. So think about, your connections to family and your support network. Because again, coming out of university, with $360,000 of debt, that's a lot of stress on a young person. And it doesn't have to be that way.
And I think with the pandemic, having different kind of variants all around floating, I think it was a very, very lonely experience, Tiffany, last year for some of the students. Like I said, they were stuck there, and you said, having a support system, some form of connection, where you are studying, I think would make a huge difference to,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I agree. Again, some kids are really outgoing and they'll find their support network, but it's not always easy to do. So yeah, and some of the universities are very good with mental health support and things like that, but some of them are really struggling. They have they're kind of they're stretched thin. So that's another thing. Don't be afraid to ask that when you're interviewing these universities and finding if they're the right fit for you.
So I want to come to that since I am into this profession. So in terms of mental health that you were saying, we've seen a lot of people having a lot of anxiety, depression. Do you think this would be something that the person has to put up in the application? Are these things that we talk about during this whole process of admission? Is it necessary?
Well, I have some students who are very open about it, and they actually write their essay about it, because one of the questions for the US is, tell me about a time that you made a bad decision, failed at something, and what did you learn about yourself? And so they're very open about their journey, and quite proud about where they have ended up, because that struggle has made them who they are. And I feel like for universities, they know that this is a time that kids are struggling. High school, college age, developmentally, it's a tough time. I was very good at high school, but I would never go back and do it again. Honestly, it's tough. So don't underestimate how tough it is. And so I think universities are almost relieved when kids have dealt with some of these issues in high school and come out stronger on the other end, because they know it's inevitable. You're going to have some problems in college. It's just a normal time to have problems, and they know that now you're equipped for it.
Right.
I have other kids that don't want to share, and that's okay too. It's their personal private information. and that's all right too. But I would say that sometime during the process, before you choose your university, you should make sure that they can support you in what you need. Again, this is a time to be selfish. So if you know that, you have, highs and lows, and you're going to need somebody, who, where you can get an appointment within 24 hours if you're hitting a low, then you need to make sure that that university can do it, because some of them are great at it and some of them really struggle. Some of the smaller universities, it's very easy to get an appointment. The drawback is they might only have one or two counselors. So if you don't click with them, then that can be difficult. But I've also been talking to universities that have really overdone how they do their counseling. It used to be that when you went in for counseling, they kind of started, okay, tell us about your childhood, this like deep dive. And it's like, whoa, right now I just need to get so that I can get through this week, because this is a really hard week for me. I don't need to, do my deep dive right now. I'll do that when I have breathing space. And so universities have really started to kind of overhaul how they're doing it. But I know other universities where it might take you 7 weeks to get an appointment. Right. So you really need to be honest, and say, that's not going to work for me. I know that I'm somebody who's going to have these issues. I'm somebody who needs some support, and I can't wait 7 weeks.
Yeah, but I would just say the tele-counseling or the telehealth services in terms of mental health. So wherever you are in the world, you can touch base with your counselor back home.
That's right.
That's a fantastic thing that we've started. But having said that, you need some support on ground. And I think that's very important. So to overcome, this whole experience of shame, because there is still a lot of stigma attached in terms of mental health,
There is. And I think it's getting better. I mean, again, if there's silver linings, I do feel like this last year has really, brought some conversations to a head, which are long overdue. Honestly, I think everybody should have a counselor. And I'm not just saying that because I am a counselor, but what a great thing to have someone listen to you and so that you can process, these things that are going on. And I do think that people are talking a little bit more about it, but I agree. I still think that we have a long way to go.
Tiffany, I just want to put up, this whole concept of exams. How do you think, because like we said, a lot of stuff has been going online. We've also seen in the more traditional schools, children dealing with it in different ways. So we've seen the people who scored very low getting very high scores. And, and it's really disappointing for the rest of them, the rest of the class. So how do you think education is going to get transformed? Are we going to see, of course, we're going to go back to school. We are waiting to go back to school. The physical interaction is very important. How do you see this changing education in the long run?
Yeah, and again, I come from the US, which is not based on external exams. Even an SAT or an ACT exam is not an entrance exam. We do things holistically. So it's part of the application, but it's not sort of the, it's not like if you get this score, you're in, and this score that you're out. And, that system is great if you're above that cutoff line. It's very clear, exactly how you get in and why you didn't get in. And so I think some kids really appreciate that. But for other kids, again, if you apply somewhere that's more holistic, then maybe you can say, listen, external exams aren't my thing, but look, I do these things, I'm a really good presenter, or I'm really good in this interview or whatever else. So I do think that if you stay, you've mentioned that I've been in India. This is my 6th year. And I love it. I mean, we can't wait to get back. My son asks every day when we're going home. So, I hope this comes across not as an ugly expat, but, because I really do love India. But I think if you stay in India for university, it's still really competitive. We don't have enough universities in India for all the amazing kids that we are producing. And so if you're going to stay in India, even universities that don't have a very good reputation are hard to get into because we just don't have enough seats. It's getting better every year. We're getting plakshas, we're getting krayas, it's getting better every year, but it's still not enough. So if you're a kid who is really struggling with these entrance exams, then look outside of India, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. The university that I talked about where you can do the first 2 years in India and then transfer to the US, that's right in downtown Mumbai. It's not difficult to get into. You can do your first 2 years and then transfer to a US university. Yes, US universities are expensive. Yes, UK universities are expensive, Canada, but there's also a lot of scholarship money. And they're not just because you got a top score. These universities outside of India value you because you're bringing another perspective. They don't want just kids from their country. Higher education is where you're supposed to be meeting kids from other countries and seeing how a different part of the world does things. So they will value you because you're going to bring an Indian perspective. And so they're willing to give you money to do that. So don't be scared off by the price tag for some of these universities. Again, if you'll look at, the second or third tier competitive schools, there's a lot of scholarship money. So, I think that's what I would say is don't be afraid to look outside of India, because outside of India, it's not so competitive. There's US universities that take 100% of the kids that apply. I have kids apply to Dutch schools and they find out an hour and a half later that they got in. It doesn't have to be so cutthroat. And there are some great unis in India. It's just, they're still really competitive to get into. Ashoka is Ivy League numbers.
Yeah.
They're like single digits in order to get into Ashoka. Like that's insane.
So in terms of scholarship that you were mentioning, so is this up on the university website? So is there a particular platform that the students can approach for scholarships?
So a lot of schools, the scholarships are just because you apply. So you don't have to do anything extra in order to be considered for these applications. And, my school is an IB school, so we're on a 45-point scale. And I've had students who, they've gotten a 24, which is the lowest you can get to get the full IB diploma. And they've gotten $40,000 scholarships.
Wow.
Honestly. And that's not a topper. I'm not talking about the kids that get 45s. I'm talking about kids that, barely got the diploma.
Right.
And they're still merit-based because you're going to bring a perspective that nobody else can bring to the table. So, if you're talking about, developing countries, if you're talking about IT, if you're talking, how do you have that conversation if nobody in the classroom is dealing with any of those things? So you're valuable. So sometimes going outside of India, is a really viable option, and it's not as competitive as Indian universities are. So then it takes all that pressure from those exams off.
Right. And Tiffany, I'm going to end it by saying you spoke about life skills, right? Very few schools teaching the life skills. I don't know in the pandemic situation how we are teaching life skills on Zoom sessions, because we are all tied up with our curriculum. We've reduced our times in terms of school. So, where would be, I know life skills is very important. We are seeing people learn it at home with their parents, helping around the daily course. So where else would you see, where's a platform for students to learn basic communication skills? Is there some way that we can help them?
Well, honestly, the college application process that's why I like my job. It's not because I upload transcripts. Anybody can upload a transcript,
right.
But watching students start with me in grade 9, 10, 11 and grow and figure out what's important to them, who they are. Do they want to be in front of a computer all day and that's where they're comfortable? Or do they want to be working with people? Watching their writing skills increase, watching them write an email to a university rep for the first time, which is scary because you just all of a sudden, your tongue is numb and your fingers aren't working and they can't think of it. All of that, watching them grow is why I enjoy my job, is because by the end of it, they're very capable. I don't hold their hands. I don't make their list for them. I show them how to do searches. I show them how to find information. I show them how to, I'll say, here's some things you could attend. I mean, every week we send out a broadcast that shows them what the opportunities are for the next couple weeks, but I don't force them to do things. This is their time to discover. And so I really do feel like those life skills, it's just a developmental, natural sort of thing to happen. And parents need to kind of step back and let kids figure this stuff out. On the other hand, I agree with you. I think that kids have really, depending on how families have handled the last year, I think a lot of them have sent their helpers home. And so families are doing this. I know on the JKG chat group last year, everybody, all the little people were sweeping, they were setting the table, they were, doing things that 2 years ago were really unheard of. And so I do think, learning how to do your own laundry, and figuring out, I've only got, 2 more pair of clean socks. I think it's better, I better think ahead about this. Learning how to cook realistic, healthy meals is important. And appreciating the work that goes into that stuff. And so I do feel like some families have done a really good job this last year in kind of, developing some of those skills. Normally as 12th graders, we do a lot of information on that. Here's how you do a budget. Here's what you do if you fail a class in college. Because kids have never had to deal with those things. And I feel like right now, being a little isolated, they've had to learn some of those skills. And it's hard to watch as the adults because part of you really wants to kind of wrap them in bubble wrap and just protect them from everything. But that's not the way the world works, So sometimes failing a class is the best thing you can do because you learn something, you figure out budgeting your time. And so, some of those little stumbles, I think actually can help in the long run. And some of them, they're missing school. So some of these kids that you've had to kind of poke and prod and try to get out of bed and threaten and, throw water on and whatever else, they're going to be running out the door when these schools open because they're realizing that this is a huge privilege that you get, to go to school every day and interact with your peers and teachers that care about you. So yeah, I think some of this is just really kind of happening right now, and some of it won't happen until they get out there and they run out of money on the 20th of the month and have to figure out how to get through until the next payment comes, and that's when that creativity comes into play.
So Tiffany, I think the last straw is for parents, and I have been telling a lot of parents, it's okay to postpone it for 6 months. It's okay to take a drop year as long as your child is engaging in some activity.
Absolutely.
But it's very difficult because we are in a competitive world. So parents are sort of saying, okay, is it necessary to take a drop year? What if the person gets depressed? What if they don't know what is going to happen next? What are your thoughts on that? You said parents should take a back seat. I don't see that happening too much. What are some of the things that they can do to help their kids? It's difficult for us to send kids abroad in a pandemic.
Sure. And I don't have a crystal ball, right? I'm doing the best I can with what I have, but I'm always afraid this is going to come back to bite me in 6 months when everybody's like, see, you said. So I'm doing the best guesses that I can. I think the biggest thing that everybody needs to understand is it's going to be okay. We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. We don't know if this is going to end in July or November or next February. Like, we just have no idea. So sometimes it's just one day at a time. If you want to take a gap year, take a gap year. There's lots of things that kids can still do. Normally I say don't take a gap year unless you have a plan.
Yep.
So if you really want to, like we had a student a few years ago who was working on solar panels, up north in India in one of the villages, and she wanted to take the year off and really devote her time to that for a year. That's a great gap year. Right. She had a project to work on. She had a plan. There was something else she wanted to do. Honestly, if you don't know what you want to do, go to college.
Yep.
Start taking the classes. If it's online, if it's, at one of the local universities, just go to college and figure it out there. Take some classes. If you like it, keep taking classes. If you don't, then try something else. But I do think that, it's nice to have a purpose. It's nice to have a reason to get up every day. It's nice to have homework and things to do and accomplishments. And so I can see that being really valuable. Sometimes I think this is the worst time to take a gap year because you're stuck at home.
And I'm just going to say to some of that, a very, very known research study on that is that the more you grow and the more competence the child has, the more the child engages, the higher the well-being and mental health is. I mean, that's proven over time, but a lot of people do complain about not having very high motivation currently.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you'll have days like that, right? I mean, we are human. Like, not every day is the same. We have, it's a roller coaster. And I think that the best thing that we can teach our kids is that, tomorrow or the next day is going to be better. Maybe just this much better, but a little bit better. And then you're going to have some bad days. It's okay to have bad days. It's okay to have a day where you're sad. Not everybody has to be happy all the time. I don't trust that you're happy all the time. But just know that it's not a dive bomb. It's not just going to keep going bad, 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 bad. There's going to be, little rays of sunshines, little silver linings. We left Mumbai last April. I've been stuck in the US, but there's been a lot of silver linings. My son learned how to snow ski. He got to spend Thanksgiving with his grandparents. Yes, I'm working nights. I haven't seen my husband in how many months. I mean, there's negatives too. And I embrace those times, when I'm sad because I miss my husband or whatever else. I don't just push them under the carpet. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to eat that piece of chocolate or have a good cry in the shower. Like that's all natural. But just in the back of your head, you need to be telling yourself there's always little, benefits to this stuff too. There's always silver linings. We have dads who for the first time are doing their PE dance lessons with their daughters because they've always been working so long hours that they haven't been able to do that. So there's silver linings. And I think trying to find those sometimes can be difficult, but it's really important to realize that, this is life. Life is ups and downs. And you're going to have some bad days, but you're also going to have some really good days.
So we're running out of time. I just want to get your last thoughts on the careers, right? What do you think COVID has changed in terms of, I know we've spoken about this earlier, just to end it.
Yeah. I mean, I think students are starting to realize that, careers can look very different. Again, we never thought we would be doing this.
Yes.
And I think it's opened up a lot of things for students, where before maybe you didn't think you could do something, but now like our internships have gone online. So kids can do internships with people all over the globe. We would have never considered that, 3 years ago. And so I think careers are doing the same sort of thing where all of a sudden, you can live in, this little village and still, work from home at a big multinational corporation, which again, I think companies would have never allowed that before, or a lot of companies wouldn't have allowed it before, but now you can do that. So your quality of life can be good. You can actually be at the beach in Goa and, doing your Skype calls with your clients, in New York City. So, I just think that a lot, and then fly in when you have to do your meetings. So I just think that it's kind of opened up the world a little bit. I remember how important cell phones were when they really kind of hit the market, and all of a sudden, people who never could afford landlines have a cell phone and they can call people. That's revolutionary. And I feel like this is another one of those catalysts, where all of a sudden we're going to rethink working from home. Maybe traffic will go down. Maybe people won't commute 4 hours every day back and forth. I think that this could really have some good things, where people are rethinking what it is that they want to do.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. I think that was a very, very insightful conversation. I think what you've really, really stressed on is know yourself well, know your skill set. It's not always about your marks. It's not about doing your exams and your SATs. So I think we are going to trouble you later if we need another session. I think you're really going to help some of the students, because I've seen them having huge amount of anxiety on the application process.
Sure.
So I hope this eases it off for them. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for being there. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.